Welcome to the podcast, Nikki. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so delighted to have been invited.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What's your money story?
Wow, it's a good question, isn't it? What's my money story? I suppose we have to go back to our upbringing to start off with. And I was brought up in a very, certainly not an affluent lifestyle. 3-bedroom semi-detached in an Essex, in county town of Essex. My parents were very much, if you haven't got it, you can't have it. So there was always that. We were from a very early age. We were taught the value of money and earning your money. My dad used to work extra hours. I remember my mum saying to me she wanted to buy me a red coat on Christmas that was in Bolingbroke and Wenley's in a department store in Chelmsford. And my dad did extra work in addition to his normal job to get the money to buy me this red coat. So, yeah, from a very young age, I was always taught the value of money and given pocket money for doing jobs.
And how did it feel getting that coat? Did you appreciate that coat in the way that it was generated for you?
I probably didn't at the time because I was quite young.
Yeah.
You know, I was probably only 4 or 5 years old. So it was just a new coat. But when my mum told me the story later on, then I appreciated it more because I thought, oh God, that's why he'd go out on a Saturday and not be there. It wasn't because he didn't want to be with us. It was because he was earning a little bit more money to pay for the things that mum wanted to get for us.
And did you find your parents spoke openly about money?
No, I think it was, it's very much a generational thing. And I think it was difficult because we had very wealthy mum had very wealthy cousins and sort of the social scene that they inhabited. I always felt they were on the back foot a bit. So I wasn't trying to keep up with the Joneses, but they didn't really talk about money openly or didn't really make it known that they didn't perhaps have as much as they would like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. But it was impressed on us from a very early age that, you work hard, you save. And it was never about money will buy you happiness. It was about you just want to have enough not to be in debt. Debt was not something my parents would ever entertain.
No, mine were the same. Yeah.
So, I mean, we didn't go on holiday. We didn't go on we had holidays every year. But it was the Pontins holiday camp down in Weymouth or Devon or Cornwall. And I don't think I went on a plane till I was 17.
We followed a very, very similar track because we never went abroad when I was younger. We always went to Butlins in Pwllheli every August. Partly because my mum has never particularly liked going abroad, but I think, it did come down to money as well, absolutely. And I think I went on a school exchange when I was 16 and the first plane when I was 19. So I think we followed a very, very similar track in that basis.
And I think it kind of, and I always wanted to travel. So, and I had lots of friends they were going skiing and they were doing all these amazing things. And I know, don't get me wrong, we had a fantastic childhood and we never wanted for anything, never wanted for anything. And as my parents got older and they did have more money, they traveled a lot in their later life. But certainly when we were little, it wasn't an option. But then for me, I think that in the back of my head, I always thought, well, I'm going to show my children the world, and we're going to travel from a very early age. I mean, both mine were on a plane at 6 months old.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how you kick against that in some respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember saying to my youngest son, he's 14 now, the first plane trip he went on was when he was 18 months and we went business class to Barbados. And I said, just imagine if your life continues in this vein, it won't be, you will be aiming for first class rather than business class. But because of that experience, he has always had this kind of attitude of gratitude that he's been lucky to experience and do the things he's done far younger than I did them. And I think as a parent, that's what we want for our children, isn't it? To be able to experience a childhood which was different to ours. Like you, I did not want for anything. I had no awareness of money really when I was a child at all. It was just something that happened. I always had what I wanted at Christmas, birthdays, food on the table, etc., etc. But I think once you become aware that there is more you can do, you do have that desire, don't you, to be able to give your children those experiences.
I think you do, but I think that only comes when you're at that age, because certainly when my first job was very glamorous. When I was 14 years old, I worked in the fish and chip shop on our estate. And the reason I worked in the fish and chip shop was because if I'd worked in Freeman Hardy Willis, the shoe shop, on a Saturday, I would have earned £7. But because I worked in the fish and chip shop, I had 2 evening shifts, Monday evening and a Thursday evening, and a Friday late night. And I earned £16 a week, which back in the day was a lot of money. It was a nice amount of money. And all of a sudden I could go and buy all the clothes I wanted. So I was very, very financially independent from my parents from quite a young age. And then when I went to college, and I had a place to study law. And you know what your parents are like, oh, she's going to be a lawyer, she's going to be wealthy, she's going to have this amazing life. But for me, it was, oh my God, that's 7 years of my life. I want to travel. So, you know, being me, I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to defer, and I'm going to go and work, and I'm going to earn some money, and I'm going to go traveling. And I never came back and did the law degree.
And do you regret that?
Sometimes when I'm watching something on the telly, I'm thinking, oh, I could have done that. I could have been the Crown prosecutor. No, I don't, because I think, the path we are, I think our paths in some respects are predefined. And I think if I'd have gone down that route, I probably wouldn't have met my late partner. We probably wouldn't have had the success that we had together. And I think my life would have been very, very different. And although my life hasn't panned out how I would have wished, I certainly feel that had I gone down that path, no, it wouldn't. Definitely wouldn't have been right for me at the time. I needed to travel. And so I did. I just went off to Portugal, didn't have a job to go to, didn't have any idea what I was going to do, thought I'd be away for 6 months, and was actually away for 4.5 years. So
that's testament. Do you enjoy it? That's testament to how much you got out of that experience.
Yeah. And I always make, but people said, how did you survive? And I said, well, I picked jobs where I would earn good money in a short period of time. So, for example, I'm not proud of this, but I used to sell timeshare.
Well, some people have had a great amount of joy from their timeshare. So,
exactly. So, I wasn't one of those people on the streets. I was up selling, and I used to work for 9 months of the year. And then that enabled me to travel for 3. So
a life by your design.
And that's what has always been my even now with my business. I always talk about creating a business you love that works with the life you live. I've always been one of these people that designs my life. And so for me, money has always been the thing that enables me to design my life and create a life that works around me and my family, or whatever I'm doing at the time. So
sorry, carry on. Sorry.
So 4.5 years traveling, it gives you a real perspective on life, on businesses. I was in India. I worked for Mother Teresa in the home for the dying and the destitute. So you see people at absolute rock bottom. And then I was in India, and I got picked up walking down the street by a Bollywood star and invited to his film premiere. So you go from one extreme to the other, but it gives you a real appreciation of how life can change, just by circumstances, not necessarily by design. And then I came back to the UK. because I woke up one day in America and thought, do you know, I've got to go home and get a proper job. You know, you
Isn't it
suddenly,
funny? We do have these awakenings. You know, something goes on somewhere, a conversation takes part in part of our brain, and suddenly we go, switch, right, I now need to go and do that.
and you know, I've always done that. I've always had this switch in my head. So this poor guy that I was traveling with, my boyfriend of 3 years, you know, imagine waking up in Florida and you're supposed to be going. We were supposed to be going to the Grand Canyon, and him waking up and me standing there with my return ticket, my open return ticket, saying, "I've just booked a ticket to go home." Why? Yeah, I think I'm going to go and get a job now. And he's like, "You don't need to go and get a job now." I said, "No, I do. I feel I need to go and get a job." You know, and literally phoned my mum and said, "Pick me up from Gatwick on this flight."
I'm coming home.
Yeah, and she hadn't heard from me for months, and it's like, oh God, she's back again. What
Yeah.
does she, you know, how long is she going to be back for this time? So yeah, I came home and got a proper job.
And what do you think was your motivation for doing that? What was it that, you know, you woke up one morning and rather than continuing the traveling, you decided, actually, I'm going to go home now and I'm going to get a proper job?
I think because probably in the back of my head, you know, my grandmother had died whilst I was away, and I had to fly home for her funeral, and I kind of saw other people creating, you know, having a career, and there was always that thing. I tell you what it was. It was parents' evening. And I remember my maths teacher, my dad told me this a few years ago. He said, went to parents' evening, and I'd really been struggling with my maths O level. And my dad and mum went along, and my teacher said to Mr. Smith, his name was, my teacher said to him, "Mr. Stock, you do not need to worry about Nicola's maths. I can assure you that one day she will make more money than you ever have." And that and my dad said that to me. And of course,
Yeah.
when we then had the really successful business that we had, he reminded me of that. And he said, so, you know, and I think that was in the back of my head all the time, thinking, you know, Mr. Smith said I could do something really amazing, and I'm sitting in a cheap motel in Florida with my backpack, thinking, this is not quite what I had in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you feel when your dad told you that?
I said, God, I said, I can't remember, I can't believe you remembered that. And he said, because he said, you did it. He said,
Mm.
you did do that. And, you know, you Colin, my late partner, he said, you had that amazing business. And, you know, and he said, I'm really proud of you.
Just must be
You know,
lovely to have heard as well for him to say
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. He said, I'm
Yeah.
really proud of you. You know, you've achieved far more than we have. And that's great. You know,
Yeah.
we love to see that you and the family are settled, and you have a nice life and a nice house and all the things that they would aspire to, that you aspire to for your own children.
Yeah.
I kind of aspire, you know, even though I didn't do the law thing, and, you know, didn't ever get married. I think you know, he always wanted me to get married and didn't ever get married. But other than that, I think, you know, I've
You
achieved what you.
exceeded
Yes,
expectations. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And talk to me about, so what happened from when you got home, you decided you wanted a proper job, to
Yeah.
the business that you established with Colin?
Yeah. So yeah, I came home and I obviously got lots of sales experience from doing timeshare. I was always selling, I was always hustling, for want of a better word. And I just walked into a job with Bupa. And I was area sales manager for Bupa, but for business health insurance. So I sold, yeah, health insurance to corporates. And I did that for a couple of years. And I met Colin just before I started work at Bupa. I was temping for a sales and marketing company, and I was temping for the managing director. The managing director called me into his office one day and he said, "Oh, the sales director's coming back from holiday this week. I'd only been there 2 weeks." And I said, "Okay." And he said, and he hasn't got a PA at the moment, so I need you to step in and look after him. And I said, "Great." And he said, "But I'm just going to tell you now, I don't condone inter-office relationships." Well, that's like a red rag to a bull, isn't it? If someone tells you not to do something, you think, and I
You
think,
want to do it.
yeah. And I said to him, "Well, I'm not thinking of that." And he said, "Believe me, you will." And of course, I'm sitting at my desk, and this blonde bronzed Adonis kind of walked by, wafting God knows what aftershave it was at the time. And I turned around to the other PA and I went, "Who's that?" And she went, "That's the sales director."
That was Colin.
And that was Colin. and the rest was history. So I got a job at Bupa, was Bupa a couple of years, and then I decided I needed to move on. So I started to work for Thomas Cook Travel Management. And that's where I kind of realized that I was quite good at influencing people to think the way I thought or buy things off me. So I was sales manager for Thomas Cook and looked after accounts like General Motors, Goldman Sachs, and we would basically sell their travel for them, sort out all their route deals, deal with all the airlines. My accounts were normally around about the 10 million mark. So that's what I was always selling. And I, loved it, absolutely loved it. Then woke up one day, like I do, and said to Colin, I think we've been together a couple of years, and we just bought the house that we're in now, Lansdowne House. And I said to him, "Oh God, I'm really sorry." He said, "What?" I said, "I forgot to have a baby." And we'd agreed, when I met him, he was 11 years older than me. And he said, I don't want to get married again. And I definitely don't want children. And, he had a whole list of things that he definitely didn't want to do. And I was like, yeah, but I really need to have a baby.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. And he said, "Can I think about it?" And I said, "Yeah, of course you can." He said, "What happens if I say no?" And I said, "Well, I might have to go and find somebody else." Not that I was I was putting a gun to her head. Anyway, I had the babies, and had a couple of years off work. And knew instinctively that I didn't want to go back to work and be in that environment where I was always going to have to be making a choice.
Yeah.
So when I did my first return to work interview which was then American Express, because they got taken over during my maternity leave, I'm sitting there with my 3-month-old baby on my lap, and they're saying, "Well, we've amalgamated and we've done this, so we thought you'd like to work in Europe." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?"
Yeah.
And the logic was, "Well, you live near Stansted Airport and you're only an hour from Luton, so you'll be able to get out there really easily." As I hold my 3-month-old baby up in front of them and say, "And what are we going to do with her?"
Yeah.
So I negotiated my exit and sort of sat at home for about a year thinking, what am I going to do? And at the time, Colin was working for brokers. And this broker, they were in the FMCG space. So they would bring brands in from all over the world and put them into the major multiples. And they had this particular client who came to them who had 3 or 4 brands. And one of the brands they had was Banana Boat Sun Care. And they wanted to introduce it to the UK market. And all they'd done was put it with a little distributor on the coastal resorts down in Devon and Cornwall.
Mm-hmm.
So it was turning over about 75,000. And they really wanted to sort of penetrate the UK market. And the company that Colin was working for, they didn't have enough resource in the sales team at the time to do it. And so him being him, just said, "Oh, Nikki will do that. She'll do it. She'll do it. She'll be brilliant at it." And he came home and said, "Oh, got your job 3 days a week if you want. You can play with this brand for us." So I said, "Well, I'm not going to play with it. I'm going to, try and do something with it."
Yeah.
So I went in, had a chat with the chief exec at the time, and he said, what do you want to do?" And I said, 3 days a week, leave it with me. Anyway, I started work on the brand, and just as we started work, the company that had it, the brokers, went into administration.
Oh.
So there was frantic phone calls going back and forth from America to us. It was an American brand saying, "Do you two want to just pick up the brand and run with it and see what you can do over the next year?" And so we were like, "Yep, we can get an office, we can get an accountant, we need to get warehousing and distribution," because the stock was all in a warehouse that was just about to be seized by the administrator.
Oh my goodness.
So it was literally
time of the essence.
72 hours of just getting everything out. And I had a meeting with Tesco's the week after, and new sun care buyer who wanted to obviously make his mark. And I ended up having probably one of the biggest new listings in there. So literally 15 SKUs, seasonal aisle, straight in, fantastic. And then we literally spent 9 years building that brand up from 75,000 to 6.5 million.
Wow.
Between the two of us.
Yeah.
We knew where the line across the office was. So I was creative corner, and if you walk, you could easily tell who sat where, because if you look at my side of the office, it's just full of paperwork and a complete mess. And you looked at his side of his office, and the ruler was laid out at the end of the day, and the pens were all in a line, and the stapler was there, and it was all very
neat and tidy.
Yeah. Mr. Finance and logistics. It also did the sales, but was very much that side of it. Whereas I was very much the let's go and sell it to so and so. Let's put some let's do this, that, and the other. And we were, we had a very lovely business from that, and we had a very lovely income from that, and from that we had a very lovely lifestyle. So as you know, I'm a great skier.
Yeah.
And our kids went skiing from the age of 4. We skied 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And I suppose looking back now, perhaps we were a little bit frivolous with the money, but we made that conscious decision that we wanted to work hard and play hard
and create those memories.
But not at the cost of our relationship with our children. So there was never once when one of us wasn't at the school gates at 3:30. And my kids even say that now. They'll say, we didn't realize how lucky we were that you were there until they spoke to their friends and they weren't. Or they, we didn't realize how lucky we were to go skiing every year because that's what they knew. And it was only
their normal.
When they went out, they didn't realize. So, it was good for us. And then unfortunately, the brand, or the parent company, got sold to another major company, and it was all absorbed. And we were given 3 months' notice that we were no longer going to be the distributor, and we had all our eggs in that basket.
Oh my! So how did that impact you?
It was massive, because all of a sudden, we're looking at 6-figure income for the two of us to nothing. And I suppose you could say, well, that was very naive of you and very silly to have all your eggs in one basket, but we would not have had the time to do another brand, not unless we expanded. And we like to keep things small. We like to be totally on it. We were very involved. It was our brand. It wasn't really the parent. It was our brand. We did it. So that was a bit of a stressful time. And there was a little bit of legal stuff going on, but we won, which was great. So that gave us some money to live off of. And I had an online shop. I did have a side gig at the time. So I had an online shop, and I was also consulting in the baby industry, bringing brands over from Europe into the UK and baby. So I had a little bit ticking over. But Colin didn't really have anything on the horizon. And I thought he was having an affair, because he started to be very subversive and sort of, there was these quiet phone calls and going out at really odd times of the day and not telling me where he was going. And I was thinking, what's going on? All the stress of losing the business, what's going on? And then he came one morning, he said, what are you doing today? And I said, well, what are you doing today? And he said, I've got something to show you. So we got in a car and we drove across. I live in Cambridgeshire. We drove to Northampton, and he took me to an industrial estate and got out the car and kind of just said, ta-da, and stood in front of this massive industrial unit. And I'm thinking, why are you ta-daring me? What are we ta-daring at?
What am I looking at?
What am I looking at? All I could see was this sort of derelict building. He goes, we have just bought this business out of administration. And I was like, have we? Oh, that's exciting. What is it? He said, well, I didn't want to tell you because you wouldn't want to do it. So I said, probably not. And we bought a pet food supply kind of wholesale business out of administration. And the plan was that we were going to, it was mainly wholesale. And the plan was we were going to turn it into retail as well. And then once we'd worked out the model and how it was going to work, we were then going to start creating, they were like mini Pets at Home or country stores, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know.
So we were then going to create maybe 6 or 7 of them across East Anglia, put a manager in each of them, and then that would be our retirement plan, and we would just skim off the top. So that was the plan. And I kind of, although I wasn't particularly on board with it, because what I know about pigeons, you could write on the back of a postage stamp. And
So
yeah, but we had a lot of pigeon customers.
Mm.
That's a whole new episode. If you ever want to know about pigeon fanciers of Northampton, I'm your girl. So yeah, we bought this business, and it was going great, and it was beginning to turn over what we wanted to do. We had, as you know, I'm a strategist, and I was putting the strategies in place as to how we were going to turn this business around and how it was going to work. And then Colin had to go into hospital in the October to have some surgery, because he'd done his rotator cuff skiing, as you do. And as he was coming out of recovery, and I went to visit him, I noticed there was a lump on his neck. And I said to him, "You got a lump on your neck?" And he was like, "Oh, they've had to dig in there. They've gone in really deep. I'm sure it's something to do with it." And I thought, I'm not happy about that. Anyway, long story short, just after Christmas, he was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer.
Oh.
And it's called mantle cell lymphoma. There's only about 5,000 cases in the world. Ironically, if he had it now, he'd probably still be with us, because the treatments have moved on, and immunotherapy is one thing. So we then had a situation where he was very, very, very ill. He was having chemotherapy 5 out of 7 days in a week by IV, not even going in for a day, but 5 days, and then coming home and being very, very ill at home. And we'd have maybe 1 week in 4 where he could function. So we just had to leave the business ticking over. We had a manager in there, and we were just kind of keeping an eye on it, but we certainly couldn't do any growth.
Be really involved, yeah.
No. And then fast forward to February 2012, I decided he'd been in remission, he'd fallen out of remission, he was back having chemotherapy. And then in February 2012, I decided to join the critically ill party, and ended up in Patworth Hospital in Cambridge on ECMO life support, in a coma for 2 weeks with pneumonia and multiple infections. Died twice, which is another story. Really poorly. And yeah, it was a really tough time. The kids didn't know what was happening. And again, the money story comes back again, because I used to handle our money. So he didn't know about topping up my son's finger for cashless catering, or that I moved money every month into the hole in the wall account, and he'd be going there and there'd be no money coming out, and nobody knew how to get it. So I'm very passionate now about the big red bus policy, and making sure that if you are out of your business, somebody can run it, or out of your life, somebody can run it. Anyway, very long story short, I came out of hospital at the end of March, and Colin died 10 weeks later.
Oh my goodness.
So you can imagine, I'm 6.5 stone, very, very weak. And I've got a business where I have 5 members of staff who are relying on me to
keep things going.
Get things going. So I was literally back over at the warehouse the day after he died, saying, "He's died. I'm in charge. Not quite sure what I'm doing, but we'll sort it out." And then for the year and a half afterwards, I was literally working 6 days a week, dragging my son over there, following the strategy I put in place to get the business to a level where I could sell it. Which I did. So I took it up to about just over, I think it's about 1.6 million, and then sold it to a supplier, which was great. Nice exit strategy, negotiated a deferred consideration, which meant I could then spend a year staring into space and thinking what I was going to do next. But in terms of what it did with the money, I've been hugely successful and had, as I say, 6-figure salary, to not having any money, because we couldn't take anything out of the business.
It was taken away from you.
Because we turned, we bought this business out of administration on the understanding that we probably wouldn't take a salary out of it for a couple of years. So that was okay. But then we weren't planning on somebody being ill, and, using the critical illness payout was what we lived on for a couple of years. And then, the other thing is, and this is for anyone who listens to this, I'm going to say it very clearly: no ring, no rights. Absolutely no rights at all. So you won't get if your partner dies, you won't get their pension. You'll get a lump sum, but you won't get their pension.
Yeah.
And some of them may give your child a small amount until they're 18,
Yeah.
but then that goes. You won't get your state pension. The money that he's paid in for years and years and years and years dies with him. So there's no money.
Yeah.
There's no money coming your way. And so I had nothing, and I had a £250,000 mortgage.
And that, you know, that is, you know, as you say, the word of warning that people need to take, you know, listening to this, is that it is important to legally protect your loved ones in whatever way you need to legally protect them, because the law can work in your favor, but equally it can work against you if you are not understanding of the situation you're in and look to take advice on making that situation the best it can possibly be.
And, you know, we thought common law was good enough, and we had no idea that, you know, his old company pensions would not recognise me as his spouse.
Yeah.
You know, and we never had a burning desire to get married. We never, you know, but I'll tell you now, if anyone wanted to put a ring on my finger, I'd be, yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, I'm not going to go through that again.
Yeah.
But what that does to you, so financially, you're suddenly thinking, oh my God, I've got this mortgage. I've got, my kids were 17 and 15, just about to go off to uni. So I've got to pay for them to go through uni. I'm going to have to find another way to make money and start again.
So what did you do?
So that's what I did.
Yeah.
I knew I was still had a couple of, well, I actually got a job for 9 days. I actually got a job. I can't even really talk about it in case I listen to it, but I lasted 9 days because it was European sales director, again in sort of FMCG, but they wanted to micromanage me, and I am not a person to be micromanaged. So 9 days and I was out, which wasn't my finest hour, I have to say. It's not something I'm particularly proud of, and it's not on my CV or on my LinkedIn. You won't find it anywhere. But I always knew that I was good at sales, I was good at marketing, I was good at strategy. So I bought a franchise. I bought a marketing franchise, and I did that for a couple of years, but realised I would be better off just doing it myself.
Yeah.
And I also accidentally, things often happen to me accidentally, I accidentally bought a networking franchise.
How do you accidentally do that? Just so we can all be aware that it doesn't happen to us.
Yeah, no,
if we don't want it to.
Well, you kind of, somebody says, oh, you should go to this network, and like, oh, I can't be asked, sorry, but you know, I really can't be bothered with this. No. And they said, but you really should go. I think this lady really wants to meet you. So you get dragged along to a networking group, and you go along, and you kind of think it's all right. And then a lot of the people in the networking group get in touch with you and say, oh, you know, you're really good, you're really interesting, really like what you had to say. Are you going to join? And I'm like, absolutely not. No, I haven't got time, don't need to do it. I'm busy. But the lady who had the franchise, her husband was unwell. So obviously that resonated with me. And she was actually desperate to sell it. She was just desperate. So I just need somebody that can just come in and pick it up and take it over and run with it. And, you know, you can have it for very little money. And it was very little money. And every bone in my body was going, do not buy this. You don't want to do this. It's not your thing. You know what you're doing. And me being a bit of a nurturer and a rescuer and an empath is going, I'll buy it. And as I'm saying, I'll buy it, I'm thinking, don't buy it.
Why?
Yeah. Why would you do that? Anyway, I bought it, and then I ended up with 7 groups across East Anglia and over 100 and something members, and I did it for 7 years.
Yeah. And did you enjoy doing it?
I loved it. I loved it at the time. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to go back to networking again, but I think it's all about coming back to what I was talking about before, designing your life.
Yeah.
And for me, having a very, very big understanding of how short our lives are, and realizing that we cannot, you know, we go to bed every night not knowing what tomorrow will bring. You know, we can have a plan, but actually the plan is there is no plan, because we don't know what's going to be thrown at us. So my thing now is about designing my life and creating a life that works around what I want to do and the way I want to live. And as you know, I have a property in Spain now as well. So I have to be mindful of my time and how I'm spending it. So yeah, that's why I moved away from that, because I didn't want to have to be somewhere at the same time every month doing the same thing.
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't deal with rigidity and schedule particularly well. I like to have, a bit of a game plan that I'm working to in terms of my working week, my schedule, etc. But I don't necessarily like, well, on Monday, every week at 4, you're going to be doing this. On Wednesday, every week at 2, you're going to do that. I find that very restrictive. And I think for me, that was spending 20 years in corporate life where you had to have that rigidity, basically.
Yeah. And so I worked out the other day, I've actually been self-employed for 23 years.
Yeah.
And no, I don't regret it.
Yeah.
I really don't regret it. And yes, I wish things had turned out differently, but we can't change that. But so all we do is we take what we know and we work with it. So, I've been mentoring and strategizing. That's what I do most of the time, mainly with women, although I've started working with men again recently. So that's a whole new ball game, and loving it. They seem to be far better at getting things done. Dare I say it, but they do. You say, oh, so we're going to do this, and then they text you the next day and say, I've done it already, and you think, oh my goodness, that's amazing, well done. So yeah, that's what I like to do now. Predominantly strategy and mentoring is where I see myself and where I intend to be for the future.
Yeah,
with some smarter networking thrown in.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We go through life and we get a much bigger appreciation of who we are and what we want to do, and get put more effective boundaries in place for ourselves, so we don't have that boundary creep of saying, yes, okay, I'll do that, when we're thinking, why did I say yes to that? I don't want to do that. And I know now, work-wise, I am much more strategic about what I do and a lot more intentional. And I find that works for me far more effectively than just go, I'll give it a go. I'll see if it works. I want to kind of go in there with a bit more of a plan with regards to my overall master plan, basically.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. It's about being flexible enough, but without saying yes to everything, because otherwise you're just going to put yourself into a state of overwhelm,
absolutely,
stress, and that's not going to be good for you either.
No, I totally agree. So what's next for you?
What's next for me? I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing, actually. So yes, the mentoring and the strategy is where I see myself. So you can work with me one-to-one. I'm predominant. I do the odd group program, but I like one-to-one because everyone's business is so unique. Everyone has their own way of approaching things. And I think when you work one-to-one, you get far more out of your client certainly gets far more out of it. And I get far more out of it because I get really down and dirty with their business, but I get right into their business and I treat it like my own business.
Yeah.
And we work together and alongside each other. People always say, sometimes people introduce me and they say, oh, this is Nikki, she's a coach. And straight away I say, I'm not a coach.
Yeah. I'll tell you what to do. I won't coach you what to do.
Yeah, I'm not going to coach you, and I'll work alongside you and I'll be a sounding board and I'll be all these things, but I'm not a coach.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be doing that. And I am launching smarter networking in the autumn. And the only reason it's in the autumn is because Spain is calling and nobody really wants to do networking. But smarter networking isn't networking as we know it, because there are it's not elevator pitches. There's no elevator pitches. It is purely for solo entrepreneurs, because there's lots of networks out there for people who are in big corporates and everything else. But for solo entrepreneurs, we have different needs and wants.
Yeah.
And even if we're starting to scale our business, we want to talk to other people that are in the same space and they're just about to do things. So smarter networking is all about meaningful conversations with people at the same stage of business as you are. It's not open to anybody. It is curated. It is by application, because I want to make the groups. I'm very good at putting people together.
Yeah.
So my worst nightmare is walking into a free-for-all networking thing, because I just know there's going to be people there. It's like going to be people that I'm going to be interested in, but there's other people that I think, you know what, this isn't my tribe. This isn't where I want to operate. This isn't where I want to be. So I think by curating things very, very carefully, you can create a much better outcome for everybody who's in that group.
Yeah.
So that will be launching in September, and it will be online and national, but we will have live in-person events as well, sort of socials, lunches and dinners throughout the year. So it's going to be the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I think people have come to appreciate, haven't they, that hybrid world. So it's not all online and it's not all offline. To have that mix of both allows you to have that flexibility, but also to be able to have that proper connection, which for many of us, we didn't actually realize we needed, because we took it for granted prior to the pandemic. And it's only been post the pandemic have we actually realized we do thrive when we properly physically connect with people, can see their, the whites of their eyes properly, as opposed to over Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I agree. But then I think the benefit, if there was a benefit of the pandemic and everything else, was we realised that we can also network online.
Yeah, definitely.
And from a time point of view, if like me, I'm only working 4 days a week, so I'm a little bit more time poor. For me to go to a network and it's, an hour and a half's drive and a 2-hour meeting, an hour back, that's my day. Whereas if I come down into my office in my pajamas, put my shirt on, press the button, I'm on and off in an hour and a half, and I've still got the rest of my day to be productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me personally, I like the best of both worlds.
Oh, me.
I love meeting people. I mean, we met in person for the first time at the event the other week. So I love meeting people online, love meeting them face to face. That works for me.
Yeah. I agree. No, I totally agree. I could not go back, I think, to it being one or the other. I'm very grateful for the pandemic, because you've got to see the gratitude, in things. I'm very grateful that the pandemic gave everybody the ability to accept technology far more quickly than they would have done. I am grateful that there are now processes in place to allow you to manage your business online more effectively. Even in our property business, the legal system caught up massively with technology because of the pandemic, and particularly in France, where they were antiquated. They were forced to catch up in a way they probably would never have done in their own time if something like the pandemic hadn't forced them to. So I think there's definitely advantages, but you also do, as you've said, have to work out what's the best and most effective way of working for you. What is the pattern that's going to allow you to live your life as well as build your income, build your wealth? And when you can do and live a life by your design, I had a little feeling in my stomach as I said that then, because I think that is it. Living a life by our design doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, doesn't mean it's going to be without challenges, but we are responsible for what happens, the success or the opposite of that. And I think for all of us to be able to create that sense of responsibility for our lives, that is hugely empowering.
It is. And that, that's why I always say, whenever I sit down with people, the first question I say to them is, what is your design for life? And they don't know.
Yeah.
Most people don't know because they haven't thought about it.
No.
They're just either chasing the money or doing this, doing that and the other. And if we can design our lives, and just to finish up, somebody said to me the other day, does money buy you happiness? No, it doesn't buy you happiness. It buys you freedom and choice.
Yeah.
And that's, you and I appreciate that. We choose to live our lives this way. That's what money does. And yes, of course, I'd like a little bit more. But whereas before, I was probably chasing it, because of the fragility of life now, I'm not going to chase it at the expense of my health and my sanity.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to finish things. So how can people connect with you?
Just go to my website, www.nikkistock.com. And you can see about my mentoring, my networking, and all the other packages that I offer. So, and LinkedIn. That is my platform of choice. In terms of social platforms, I love LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. So all those details will be in the show notes so people can easily reach out and connect with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I've loved the conversation. I've loved getting to know you a little bit better, and thank you for your time today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.